Hi, Pecanwood College. So I have noticed since the start of lockdown, there have been a lot of comments that I've heard through parents and just through friends and through colleagues of the increase of anxiety in children and in adults alike. So since the start of lockdown, there's definitely been an increase. And I just thought fitting this week to possibly deal with anxiety and just some practical tips for parents on what they could possibly do just to help their children. I believe that it's a lot of it is rooted in the uncertainty surrounding the pandemic and the chaos that it brought. I think it was all quite a quick thing. None of us really understood what was happening and what was expected and how it was all going to go down. But there was absolute chaos surrounding the unknowns for us. The the unknowns about everyday life, about school, about work, about friends, about contact with people, just about daily functioning and how we were actually going to get through this time. So I think over the last couple of months, there's just been a lot of chaos. And just as we're getting used to being locked in a house, then we're slowly being phased back into the world and phased back into what life as we will learn to know it is going to look like. I started out the Snapchat by focusing just on anxiety in general and then realized I could speak for hours. And I was kind of focusing on adolescents and focusing on children, and it was just a little bit too much. So this week I'm just going to speak more for younger children. And next week I will talk on adolescents and your high school learners and how you can help with their anxiety levels. It's really hard to say how anxiety presents in children because it is vastly different from one child to the next. You might see comments of or things like biting nails, comments on sore stomachs, headaches, emotional outbursts may just become a daily thing. There might be interruptions in a child's sleep. They might start with repetitive behaviors like washing their hands repeatedly or doing certain things, just certain behaviors repeatedly. And all of these are signs and symptoms of anxiety. But no one child presents with the same signs and symptoms. Um, and sometimes you don't even see it in a child until a certain situation pops up, like a test or an exam, or a situation like a visit to the dentist or a visit to the doctor. And that's when we see the anxiety level rise and almost an irrational behavior come along with it for day to day activity that we should be okay with. So, what we need to remember as well is that some level of anxiety is actually quite a healthy thing. It can be a good thing because when we have increased anxiety, it definitely puts us into a hyper alert state. So we're just that much more aware of our surroundings. And sometimes that's incredibly helpful to us because it actually pushes us to perform a little bit better. Almost like if you're competing in a competition, you feel a higher level of anxiety, but it pushes you to perform better. Or in a situation where you're not feeling safe, you become hyper aware, and there's a possibility that that actually pushes you to protect yourself a little bit more than you would if you were not hyper aware. So, when anxiety becomes unhealthy and more of a concern, is when our performance is affected by it. So, whether it be at work or at school, when our performance is significantly affected or negatively affected by the anxiety, then that is a problem. When we're completely debilitated by the anxiety that we feel, that is obviously a problem because we are unable to then function, or when we start presenting with unhealthy behaviors, washing your hands repeatedly, if you keep checking the doors locked, or you keep presenting with certain behaviors repeatedly that interrupt your daily functioning, then it becomes an unhealthy thing. So look out for little things like that in your children. And then just parents in terms of working with younger children who are quite anxious, some practical ideas for you. Firstly, please be patient and have empathy. Um, know that these behaviors are coming from something. They're coming from somewhere. So please don't just dismiss them. Rather help your child to understand them, talk about them, help them understand themselves and what strengths they have to try and overcome it. Be careful with your words and actions so that you don't downplay what they're experiencing. Um, and please just be present and supportive and nurturing because that's ultimately what they need. If they feel safe and understood, we're able to work through things. Secondly, predictability is key. The more predictable a situation is, the safer a child feels, and they are then able to deal with what it is that is expected. So try and eliminate any uncertainties. And there are definitely situations where we don't know everything, where there are uncertainties for us as parents. And it's completely okay to say to your child, I actually don't know what's going to happen in this situation, but you know what? I'm going to be there right by your side. Or it's also okay to say, you know what, I'm not certain, but as soon as I know, I'll let you know. Those answers are absolutely fine, but the fact that your child has an answer is actually what matters. So as long as they remain informed, it just creates a predictable and a safer feeling within them. And then a child who feels safe is able to flourish. I think I have said that in a Snapchat before, and especially in a school situation, they're just that much more open to learning and now able then to flourish in that learning environment. And it's really, really important, I think, that they do have downtime. They have time to relax and time to just feel what it is like to have absolutely no anxiety present. So that time outside when you're playing with your children is vital. Um, Thirdly, there needs to be some level of control. Control is very important. And the reason is when you feel in control um, and prepared for a situation, you just naturally feel calmer. So even if you make your child in control of a situation that is completely unrelated to the anxiety, for a child to experience that feeling of control and confidence and calmness, it gives them a context when they are feeling anxiety. So you can use that as a tool to work on the anxiety provoking situations. So give them something that is within their control. I know that I sat my son down this last night and we spoke about what is in his school bag so that he doesn't become anxious when he went to school this morning. He was in control of what was in his bag and where he could find things. So when his teacher would ask him, where's your second mask? He knew exactly where it was. So that element of control is very, very important. And again, put predictability into the situation and it makes the child feel that much more in control. Number four, a mistake that a lot of us make is when you realize what your child is anxious about, so whether it be animals or whether it be school, we tend to want to pull our children from those stressful situations. And yes, short term, sometimes that is helpful because you don't experience the anxiety. But on a long term basis, it's really not a great idea because most anxiety provoking situations cannot be avoided forever. A very good friend of mine from school, her daughter is horribly fearful of small dogs. And she said that she actually avoids going to Bry's because there are often animals there, and she said it just becomes unpleasant. And for them, for now, it's okay, but it's not fixing the problem. And secondly, she's at some point going to come across a small dog. And so it's very important that we slowly integrate our children into situations where they can become more used to the thing that creates anxiety within us so that we can learn that this is actually not so bad. 5, show your children how to breathe deeply. So it slows the heart rate down, it calms us down a little bit, it helps us to just think a little bit more rationally. So actually sit your child down, especially the very anxious children, and show them how to breathe in and hold their breath and breathe out again. In very small children, sometimes it helps if you have just a bottle of bubbles in your bag and help them to blow those bubbles so that they're able to then breathe deeply and calm down. And then lastly, just remember that our anxiety is often seated in cognitive distortion, so that irrational thinking. thinking that there are monsters under the stairs, or there's monsters in my cupboard, or that the shadows are wolves. Um, that irrational thinking, it's just irrational thoughts and beliefs. And it's important that we sit our children down and try and speak them through a more rational way or a more logical way of thinking. So help them to identify that irrational thought and then speak them through a more logical outcome. Um, so yeah, I hope those tips helped for those parents that do have a bit more of an anxious child. Next week, I will speak a little bit more on how to help older children. And it's not necessarily that these tips don't help older children as well, but these ones will definitely help your younger children. Next week, listen to my Snapchat again, and I will speak a little bit on adolescents and older children. And some of those strategies can definitely help younger children as well. Um, I hope everybody has a good week. Bye.